Our viewers, you're in the Situation Room. Happening now, breaking news. Fiery images reminiscent of 9/11 as a small plane crashes into an office building housing IRS workers. An apparent suicide attack by the pilot. We're learning more this hour. Stand by.
We were in the FBI building next door with the Online Trading Academy, and the entire building shook.
I saw something fall out of the sky and then a big fireball kind of shoot out.
It was a major wake-up call. You never know when stuff like this is going to happen.
Panic and chaos as a small plane crashes into a 7-story office building in Austin, Texas, sending workers, including almost 200 IRS employees, running for their lives. Flames soon engulfed the building, calling to mind the horror of 9/11. It soon became clear that this, too, was a deliberate suicide attack, apparently by a troubled American man with a festering hatred of the federal government. We have complete coverage of the breaking news this hour. Let's begin with CNN's Tom Foreman. Tom, walk us through how all this unfolded.
Well, if we've been assembling this map of the Texas state capitol today and all that happened in this event, if we fly in here to Austin, you can see this was the strike point right down here. The airport is right up here. But all indications from authorities are that it actually started a little bit earlier than the time the plane took off, not far actually from where the building was hit. This is the home of the gentleman in question, which authorities say they believe he set on fire before he took off this morning. Then he went from this location up to the airport, which, as you can see, is a bit north. All of this is in North Austin, a little bit off to the west. This is Georgetown Municipal Airport. This is the type of plane that he was flying. There are people on the ground there who saw him taxi out and leave. We do not know much about it other than he owns this plane and that he took off from here, according to authorities, and he flew more or less, according to them, a straight path. Now, I want you to consider this. This is the airport up here, the strike point down here. He took off around 9:40 in the morning, according to authorities. They just revised this a moment ago from 10 a.m. to the crash to about 9:55 for the crash. So about 15 minutes. We don't know if takeoff is being counted from actual liftoff or taxi time. We know this plane could go up to about 170 miles an hour. It was 20 miles from the airport to the crash site, and authorities say, based on all of that and their own tracking, they believe that this was pretty much a straight flight down. He did not meander or loop all over. And then finally, he went to the actual crash site itself, Wolf. That's what authorities believe. And this, again, is on the north side of Austin. There are many businesses up here, many industries located here. This is the building in question, the Echelon building, 7 floors, housed about 199 IRS employees. The big question, of course, Wolf, that everyone is asking is the one that investigators will now have to ask, too. Big fire from this airplane. Many people are questioning, was it really just the airplane that made this happen or something more? We have no leads on that, no information really on that at this point, but we know it's one of the things they have to look into.
Whether or not the pilot loaded up the plane with accelerants to make a fire even more devastating, that's a good question. We don't have the answer to that yet. Tom, stand by. Our Homeland Security correspondent, Gene Reserve, is following the investigation for us. Gene, do officials believe the building was intentional, the building was the direct target?
They aren't saying definitively that it was, but it is something, obviously, that they're looking at very carefully. The reason that manifesto that was left on a website registered in his name, some people are saying it was a last statement, a will that he left online. Let me read you a portion of it. It's a diatribe against the government, in particular the IRS. At one point says, I saw it written once that the definition of insanity is repeating the same process over and over and expecting the outcome to suddenly be different. I am finally ready to stop this insanity. Well, Mr. Big Brother IRS man, let's try something different. Take my pound of flesh and sleep well. The IRS can't comment for us because of federal law about any interactions or transactions they had with Mr. Stack. They did send out a statement from the IRS commissioner, however, saying that it's an incident of deep concern and that they're working with law enforcement investigators as they investigate it. Federal law enforcement sources tell me that there is no indication that Stack was working with anyone else. The Austin authorities say they believe this was an isolated incident. One question that's outstanding is this. He was also involved, we're told by federal law enforcement, with the torching of his house before he took off in that airplane. We don't know what the linkage might be there. So why? A big unanswered question at this point, Wolf.
All right, Gene Meserve, thanks very much. Let's bring in our national security contributor, Fran Thompson, a former Homeland Security advisor to President Bush. The government, how does it monitor these kinds of incidents? What's going on?
Well, you know, earlier in your broadcast, Wolf, Brian Todd talked about, oftentimes we've seen these sorts of incidents happen. It's an accident, as in the case in New York, and Corey Lytle slammed into a building there. But sometimes there was the 15-year-old in Tampa where it was a suicide event. People are in private aircraft, small private aircraft, all the time, all around the country, every day. They take off and land safely. And so this is a small fraction, the ones that come to public attention that end tragically. This guy, though, I think what you're going to find is investigators are looking, were there warning signs? Were there things we should have picked up? He clearly was very angry. He posted this manifesto. Was there something that should have tipped us off to not let him get on that plane today?
Because you have to get a physical exam in order to get a pilot's license. And the question is, at that last physical exam that this individual had, was there any sign of instability, for example? I don't know what the answer is, but that would be something we would probably look at.
That's right. And what investigators want to know now is, was that part of that physical exam at all? Was it just a physical exam, or did they look at whether or not he was emotionally stable? I mean, you mentioned earlier, Wolf, it really is. There were only 40 gallons of fuel on that plane. We've seen, if you go look at the pictures going back to these other incidents that Brian Todd talked about, very small fires, very minimal damage to large buildings. And then you look at what happened today in Austin. Was there an accelerant? Were there other explosives on the plane?
Because it looks like there must have been something on board that plane to cause that devastation of that building.
That's right. Or he may have slammed into something inside the building. But investigators are going to want to understand, why was there such pervasive damage in this case, particularly in light of the fact that he had set his house on fire earlier in the day. This guy there is clearly was disturbed and was an arsonist. The
local police in Austin, we had that news conference in the previous hour, says it appears to have been intentional, a singular act, an individual acting on his own, the facility being targeted, and then they concluded by saying no cause for alarm. I guess what he meant is because this looked like an individual isolated incident. That's right, but I can tell you, Wolf, having been in the federal government and looked at aviation security, what you worry about right now in the immediate aftermath are copycats. I think what you'll see is in the near term, random security measures looking to make sure that there is nobody else, mentally unstable individuals who might take this as their inspiration and try to do something similar. Yeah, that's a really serious concern. Copycats, right. Indeed. Fran, don't go away. We'll have much more on this story.
ABC News, Washington.
Well, just a short time ago, there was a press conference by the FBI in Austin.
All indications at this point are that the pilot of the plane was Joseph Stack of Austin, Texas. However, I must caution you that a forensic confirmation of this identification remains pending. There have been ongoing reporting and speculation regarding other incidents and details regarding the life and activities of Mr. Stack prior to this event, which I'm not able to speak to or address at this time, as the investigation is continuing to confirm and corroborate those reports. Again, the FBI is not able to speculate or relate any other details due to the ongoing nature of the incident. Victim witness specialists are on scene to assist individuals affected by this event. As this incident happened early this morning, again, it's still early on in the investigation, and we will update you and the public as appropriate when facts allow.
The FBI there.
Meanwhile, the breaking news we're covering from Texas, a fiery crash of a small plane into an office building in Austin, the state capital, appears to be deliberate. What led the pilot to carry out such a violent act? We'll talk to a former FBI profiler about the suicide note the pilot apparently left on the internet.